Welcome to Second Take, the show that takes a look at the issues behind the news. Rail company Traxtion has announced that it will invest R3.4 billion to buy 46 locomotives, as well as wagons, to begin operating on South Africa's mainline freight network. Terence Creamer joins me to discuss the significance of this investment. Hi, Terence.
Hi, Chanel.
What is the background to this rolling stock investment?
Well, the big background is really that our road-to-rail strategy that's been on the cards for very many years has been failing. And we've seen this with, a number of trucks on the road, which basically keep us with goods and services in the hinterland of South Africa. But there is this move to liberalise the rail market, and the big background is a reform agenda under Operation Vurundlela, under the National Logistics Crisis Committee, to try and bring in private train operating companies. So we know it's been monopolised for over 100 years by Transnet. Transnet Freight Rail has an operating division, and there's been a split with the Transnet infrastructure manager, so that the rail infrastructure and the operations are now split within Transnet Group. And this is to facilitate so-called third-party access, to try and get the road-to-rail strategy back on track and to try and lift volumes. We've seen volumes declining to around 160 million tonnes a year on our rail, and our target by 2030 is to get it back up to 250 million tonnes of freight operating on railways. So this is the sort of big background, trying to recover the rail operations, and then in parallel there's efforts to try and get the infrastructure back into some sort of good nick. We know it's declined massively. It went through a very bad patch during COVID. It's prone to theft and vandalism, and obviously Transnet, the infrastructure manager at Transnet's doing a lot of what it can within its limited budget, and also with its client base, to try and get the infrastructure back on track. But there's also been a request for information process to look at whether people want to invest, private sector, directly on infrastructure across the corridors. And that process should evolve ultimately into proper tenders, requests for proposals. And we could see that also happening during the course of next year.
When will Traxtion begin operating?
Well, they're saying that with this acquisition, so they're bringing in Wabtec locomotives that they're going to refurbish from Kiwi Rail in New Zealand, and these are going to come through in batches to their manufacturing and assembly facility in Roslyn, and they're going to upgrade certain locomotives to a certain standard, basically get them to a level where I think they feel comfortable that they can operate on the network. So that's going to happen over the next few months. And by the sort of end of next year, third quarter of next year, they're wanting to start putting some of those locomotives and the wagons that they've also purchased onto the network. It won't be all of them. It will be a phased response. And this is, in terms of this bringing on train operating companies other than Transnet. We've had the network statement that's been in place now for a few months. It's going to be updated yearly. People have bid for the first slots, Traxtion being one of them. And I think 11 train operating companies were seen to be eligible to go onto certain routes, I think over 40 routes across 6 corridors. And this is sort of the first high-profile, visible progress, because one of the constraints is that obviously because we've been a monopolised rail business, there isn't this rolling stock available. So these new train operating companies are having to get in rolling stock, buy it in, as we see in this case, and get it into a condition to start operating. Traxtion, has got a pedigree in Africa. It operates in 10 African countries, and has this hub in Roslyn, near Pretoria, where it's able to keep these locomotives and rolling stock maintained. But others will maybe be maybe less developed, and therefore of those first 11, not many are expected to come on next year. So the fact that we'll have some private train operators is a good thing. The others will come on in 2027, maybe even as late as 2028. And then we should see another set of slots becoming available as Transnet gets its network into a better position to bring these on. Now, the big issue is that this is a footstoots type thing where you come on and the rail network condition is what it is. So that has been one of the other constraints as to companies wanting to come onto the network. But we have seen this appetite. But I think eventually it needs to be better than that. And the Transnet infrastructure manager must be able to give a basic level of service agreement. But for these first ones, it's quite on their risk. And they need to find the clients, they need to get the rolling stock. And at last, with this Traxtion, we're going to start seeing towards the end of next year their trains operating.
What does this say about the state of South Africa's rail reform agenda?
Well, this is happening. I think that's what it's really saying. There's been a lot of talk about reforming rail. There's been a lot of discussion about how to get Transnet back on track. And we are seeing progress on the Transnet side. But this is a major reform. This third-party access to the rail network, having competition, train operating companies competing with Transnet Freight Rail operating company is a big development. But it's really very early days still, and we still have to set up the regulatory environment properly for this. We have to have a network statement that I think is a bit more modernized and a bit more risk sharing than what it is currently. There's a lot of risk on the train operating company rather than on TRIM, the network operator, saying you take it or leave it sort of thing. We need to get that network up to a better standard. We need to have different elements in the system to allow for this. So can locomotives be leased? I know Transnet is looking at all the fleet that it has retired and is in not too bad condition, as well as the wagons, and looking to operate that. But is Transnet really the right person to be leasing this? Should it be outside? Should it be more arm's length? There's a lot of moving parts here, but we're starting. So, and this is an indication that we are getting going at last.
Thank you. That's the second Take Show for this week. Thank you for watching, and join us again next time for more news analysis.